And then sign this, she said, holding out a divorce form. She had already signed it herself. Laughing in a hypest voice, she added, "Goodbye to a loser. I'll be demanding alimony." "Fine by me. You know there's an inheritance meant for your father." "Let's start the inheritance procedures first," my uncle advised, leaving me astonished. I never imagined my modest-living father had such wealth. "Really, how much are we talking about?" I asked out of curiosity, only to be shocked by the staggering amount. "Well, the assets are roughly around $200 million. My name is George Anderson, a 42-year-old average office worker. I got married 5 years ago, around the time I was promoted to manager. Our office romance culminated in a wedding celebrated by our colleagues. I spent all my savings on a grand ceremony, still vividly remembering her radiant beauty and smile. She was the department starling from the day she joined. Despite not being the best at her job and being somewhat clumsy, her ever-smiling and hard-working demeanor was charming. However, I never thought I'd stand a chance with her, merely admiring from afar. Working together on a project brought us closer, and after mustering the courage to confess my love, she blushed but nodded in agreement. We dated for several years after that, leading to my proposal when I got promoted. Really, I'm so happy. As people say, the engagement ring should be worth 3 months of my salary. I went all out buying a large Alexandrite ring. She was moved, promising to never take it off. I was head over heels for her, vowing to never let her struggle. She wanted to be a housewife, saying, "Then we need to buy a beautiful home." Her beaming smile was enough for me. We searched for properties together, eventually buying a luxurious apartment and going on an overseas honeymoon she desired. Though my savings were nearly depleted, my steady job ensured a comfortable life for us. We planned to save again, especially for future children. I longed for a peaceful, happy family. Coming home to a wife waiting for me and someday adding children to that picture. Living happily as a family has been my dream for years. Perhaps it stems from losing my parents when I was young. Back then, I was completely caught up in the excitement, welcoming a beautiful wife as my partner, securing a home to live in as a family, and dreaming of the future that lay ahead. I never imagined it would come to this. A happy family life. That dream was shattered a few years after marriage. Alice was a beautiful and glamorous woman. Dressing up flamboyantly suited her, and walking by her side was enjoyable. However, that feeling lasted only until the end of our honeymoon phase and early marriage. Initially, even the smallest gifts made her happy, but 5 years in, she changed completely. She used to welcome me home. Now, returning to a locked, dark, and silent house became the norm. The scattered living room made me even more disheartened. Reluctantly, I organized a bit and changed from my suit into casual clothes before heading to the kitchen. The kitchen, unused by anyone, was clean with, of course, no meals prepared. Opening the fridge, I found it stuffed with beer and hardly any real food. I had no choice but to take out one of the instant noodles I had stocked up on and turn on the kettle. Since I don't drink alcohol, the beer in the fridge belonged to Alice. She used to try her hand at cooking. Not that she was any good, but I thought her efforts were adorable. But I realized she started to dislike cooking and suggested dining out at night. With both of us working and cooking being a hassle for her, I thought it best to give up on home-cooked meals. However, she disliked the idea of eating at nearby family restaurants or diners, always pushing for pricier places. When I said we can afford to dine at fancy restaurants every night, "What? Why don't you have the means?" Alice's beautiful face hardened as she incredulously asked that. If she disliked cooking, even supermarket deli food would have been fine, or dining at family restaurants could have been a feasible nightly routine. Yet, she'd always demanded visits to upscale restaurants. Places we'd go to celebrate special occasions, not daily dinners. I honestly didn't earn enough for that. Does this mean I lack the means? I thought I had enough to live a slightly luxurious life, but since getting married, her demands and spending only grew. She was probably out having fun again today. Disgusted by her absence past midnight, I tiredly went to bed. She returned just before I had to leave for work in the morning. Alice's late returns became a common occurrence. She'd leave the house dressed extravagantly and return just as I was about to leave for work, brushing past me without a glance, saying, "Move, you're in the way." I couldn't say anything. just sighed and left the room. I'm off. My quiet words were met with silence. Amid these days, I was shocked to find a billing statement for a card I didn't recognize. The bill was for several $1,000s. The card was likely opened in my name by Alice without my knowledge. Annoyed, I called the credit card company. Despite explaining it was unauthorized use, being married meant the charge couldn't be reduced. All I could do was stop the card. The detailed charges showed significant amounts spent at the same store. Fearing the worst, I hired a lawyer and detective to investigate. Then it was revealed that she had been spending her nights at nightclubs, lavishing money on her favorite dancer. The realization that the money I worked for to support her lifestyle was being squandered on another man was shocking. I couldn't overlook this and took some paid leave to wait for Alice to come home. It seems I had to face the reality I had been avoiding. When she woke up past noon and noticed me, Alice frowned. "Why are you here?" "It's normal for me to be in my own house," I responded, to which Alice sneered. "Oh, the house is mine now. I changed the deed, didn't I tell you?" Her laughter lacked any of the beauty she had when we married, replaced by a venomous woman standing before me. "I want to talk." "Can you sit down?" "Now you want to talk." "Well, I guess I can listen," she said, sitting across from me reluctantly. "You opened cards in my name without telling me. How much did you spend?" "I don't remember. I threw them away once they were blocked," Alice said as if discarding trash. "About the club visits." "Oh, you finally noticed. I've been going since I was working." "What? What do you mean?" She seemed amused by my confusion. "So about Kevin? Oh, he's a dancer. He became one on his own, which annoyed me, so I started dating you." I was speechless at her revelation. "I thought you were boring, but you were a good spender." "I thought that was okay," she continued, eventually speaking fondly of another man. "But you know, Kevin came back to me. He's aiming for the top spot as a dancer, and his salary is incredible." She continued talking about a man I didn't know as if she was a love-struck girl. What was I supposed to think? "So I thought I'd help him reach the top. That requires money, right? So it can't be helped." "Don't tell me you sold this house too." "Of course not. I'm planning to live here with Kevin soon." "What on earth are you talking about?" I became so confused as she spoke with disdain. "So, could you leave now?" "What? What are you talking about?" "I mean, I've already changed the deed, and I want to live with Kevin as soon as possible." "You're in the way. You have the day off, right? Pack your things and leave," she said, then returned to the bedroom, leaving me in a state of shock. I couldn't think clearly anymore and started packing my things impulsively. Then I left the house. It was pouring rain, but I didn't even care. I wandered aimlessly, drinking alcohol I couldn't handle. When I came to, I was looking up at a white ceiling. A nurse rushed over to check my pulse as I woke up. "Where am I?" "Don't you remember anything? You collapsed from acute alcohol poisoning in the rain and were brought here." "I am terribly sorry. Apparently, I had drunk myself into oblivion, collapsed on the street, and ended up with pneumonia from the rain." "You've been asleep for 3 days." "That long?" "Yes, your workplace called a few times too. It seemed I had been out for a while, likely due to the immense stress." "Oh, it looks like you have visitors," the nurse said, noticing someone at the door before leaving. Alice entered with an unfamiliar man. He had a well-groomed appearance, but his blonde hair and flashy suit led me to guess he was the dancer Alice mentioned. "Look who's alive. Thought I might get some insurance money," she said upon seeing me, sending chills down my spine. How much insurance had she taken out on me? "Oh, I threw away all the stuff you left in the room." "I see. My room was simple, and I didn't have many possessions to begin with. The things I took with me were enough." "And then sign this," she said, pulling out a divorce form. She'd already completed her signature. Laughing in a haughty voice, she said, "Goodbye to a useless loser. I'll be demanding alimony." "Fine." No longer having the energy to argue, I obediently filled out the divorce form, signed it, and handed it back to her. She happily took the documents and left with her lover. At that point, I didn't care anymore. I collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep. In the days following, 2 unexpected visitors came to see me. One was a police officer asking if I remembered being pushed by anyone, but I couldn't recall anything. The officer looked puzzled. What was that about? The second was a well-dressed, middle-aged man. I didn't know who he was, but he was oddly interested in my past. However, even if asked, I didn't have much of a past to speak of. I lost my parents in an accident when I was young and grew up in foster care without any relatives. The foster homes were often dreadful places, and I have few good memories from them. After graduating high school, I left the foster system, took a gap year to save money, and then went to college. As I recounted my past, the man began to tear up. "Excuse me, but who are you?" I apologize for not introducing myself sooner. "I'm John Smith, your father's brother. In other words, your uncle." What? I had never heard about having relatives. Well, it's possible I was too young to remember, but I had always thought I had no relatives since no one came for me. Your parents, they eloped and got married against the wishes of the family. Back then, your grandfather, my father, was furious. It seems they were truly disowned, even removing my father from the family registry. However, as time passed and my grandfather's anger subsided, he received a letter and a photo from my father saying, "You have a grandson," and he started looking for my parents in hopes of reconciliation. But by that time, the news of my parents' death had reached him. My grandfather was so shocked that he fell ill. Since then, he had been using private detectives to find out how my parents lived and where their grandson had gone. However, my parents had already been memorialized as having no relatives, and it was unknown to which facility I had been sent. You used a detective agency before, right? That's under our control. When your name came up, I had them check, thinking it couldn't be a coincidence. So you really are my uncle. Yes, that's right. You've been through a lot. From now on, we'll be here to support you, he said with a kind voice, making me want to cry. Maybe it's because I've been alone for so long during hard times. It was the first time someone told me it was okay to feel at ease. Afterward, I shared everything with my uncle, from my marriage to Alice and its betrayal to the current state of affairs, how I was betrayed from the time we were dating, treated purely as a cash cow, and how I ended up losing the apartment I worked hard to buy and drowning in debt. My uncle then patted my head, saying, "You've done well?" His hand felt so warm, and I found myself crying. "We'll take care of your divorce too, but as much as it's her fault, she's really out of luck." What do you mean? You see, there's an inheritance meant for your father that's now yours. Let's begin the inheritance proceedings. I was surprised by his words. I never imagined my modest living father had such an inheritance. Really? How much are we talking about? The figure he mentioned in response was astronomical. Well, the assets amount to roughly about $200 million. A week later, I had returned to work. My colleagues congratulated me on my recovery, expressing relief that I was safe. It seemed I had worried them a lot. With my return, I also reported my divorce, which made my colleagues give me indescribable looks. Their faces, a mix of pity and something unspoken, made me think, well, they knew her true nature. No, more accurately, rumors about her spread after our marriage. Everyone had been considerate, trying to keep the rumors from me, but it turned out Alice had been flirting with other male colleagues as well. In fact, many felt betrayed upon learning of our marriage, probably thinking she chose me because I offered the most lavish engagement ring. However, seeing me happy and apparently successful in my marriage at the beginning, they might have thought it was just a rumor. The women in the office were quite harsh, saying, "We knew she turned someone into a cash cow." They were also aware of Alice's reckless spending and her complaints about her boyfriend becoming a dancer. At the time, I was too enamored and about to get married, so they chose to remain silent. However, there seemed to be a sense of guilt towards me, having gone through such a messy divorce. It was my naivety. No one else is to blame. In the end, I got to meet relatives I thought I didn't have. I said with a smile. The atmosphere in the office lightened, and I felt happy to be working here again. After being kicked out of my home, I'm currently living in an apartment owned by the Smith family. I offered to pay rent for the quite nice apartment I was staying in, but was told, originally, this was part of the inheritance meant for your father. Live here without worry. But surely this luxury apartment itself couldn't be part of my assets, could it? With the mentioned estimate of $200 million, I was just trying to return to some semblance of normalcy amid these surreal events. That's when my cell phone blared with a call. It was Alice. What could she possibly want with me now? How could you hide assets from your wife? That's the worst. And why should I have to pay alimony? Her shrieking voice blasted from the phone. I was clueless. What are you talking about? The divorce? You should have just silently paid the alimony. Why start a lawsuit? I had been advised by a lawyer that it was better to handle things legally, but with my hospitalization and reconnecting with relatives, I had completely forgotten. I thought the divorce was finalized when she submitted the divorce papers. And you said you had no relatives. What the hell? Grandson of the chairman of the Smith conglomerate. I didn't hear anything about this. The divorce is invalid. Amid her ranting, I couldn't grasp a single thing she was saying, so I silently hung up and blocked her number. After talking with my uncle, we decided to settle things with Alice over the weekend. The restaurant booked was a private room, and when I arrived, Alice and her affair partner were already there, glaring at me. Don't worry, everything has been taken care of, my uncle reassured me, patting my shoulder before we sat down opposite them to start the discussion. But what was there to discuss? We were already divorced, and I had given up everything. So I did as you wish. Divorced and gave up the house. What are you unsatisfied about? Everything. How could someone from the Smith family live so modestly? You're hiding money from me? What are you talking about? I reconnected with my uncle after our divorce. But it seems she wasn't listening to a word I said, and not paying alimony. Suing me in civil court and me having to pay you? I glanced sideways to see my uncle smiling slyly. It appeared my family was handling things. And about the cards? You made them in your name. Why should I have to pay? No, you made them and used them yourself. But they're in your name, so you should pay, she demanded. My uncle calmly addressed her. Regarding that, the cards were not made by George. They were illegally obtained, even if you were married. What? But we shared property, so it's fine. Then you also have a responsibility to pay, her affair partner said. Come on, you're rich. Just pay up. Since you're letting her go, that should settle it, right? He interjected with a sleazy grin. Clearly, such words shouldn't come from her affair partner. So let's not bother with court and just pay up, right? It's all troublesome for you too, isn't it? His one-sided proposal was giving me a headache. However, my uncle's calm words drastically changed the man's demeanor. Well, in that case, let's also address the credit card fraud and marriage scam in the criminal court. What? Are you nuts? She just got tired of this fool. But that doesn't change the fact that under the law here, having an affair doesn't mean you have to pay alimony. My uncle continued in a slightly lower voice. Well, we can agree to pay some amount regarding the divorce. However, we can't overlook insurance fraud. What? What do you mean? George, were you aware that the life insurance taken out on you exceeded $2 million? Of course, I had no idea. When I inadvertently turned my gaze to Alice, she avoided my eyes as if trying to escape my stare. Then we'll withdraw from the civil lawsuit. We'll also pay an appropriate amount, my uncle said as he stood up, urging me to follow. As I got up and headed towards the exit, he added, Seems like if we investigate your past, we'll uncover plenty of dirt. We'll be filing this as a criminal case, so be prepared. My uncle left those chilling words for the two of them and exited the restaurant with me. Things moved quickly after that. My uncle had prepared all the necessary procedures, and I was in a position where I just had to file a lawsuit, which surprisingly went smoother than I had anticipated. We sued Alice and Kevin for attempted insurance fraud, among various other charges. The fact about the insurance was especially terrifying since I had no idea about it. On the day I was kicked out during the heavy rain, it seems Kevin had been following me, though I have no memory of it. Apparently, he pushed me down some back alley stairs and left after making sure I was unconscious. I was told by doctors that I might not have survived if I had been found any later. The early call to the ambulance was thanks to a detective from the Smith family who had been keeping an eye on me. The evidence gathered by the detective included clear proof of Alice's infidelity and an investigation into Kevin's conduct. The documents collected by the Smith family to investigate me contained various proofs, such as Alice's collusion with a judicial scribe to take over the house rights and their plans for insurance fraud, making it likely that they would be sentenced to actual prison time. Thus, my years of romance and marriage ended disastrously. In a grand single-story American house with a magnificent gate, I was able to meet my grandfather. Lying in bed, Jake Smith, a well-known investor, was my grandfather, which was hard to believe. Upon seeing me, my grandfather smiled warmly and nostalgically. "Sorry for my appearance. Come closer, let me have a good look at you," he said, and I sat down on the chair next to his bed. "Ah, I owe your parents an apology. If I had allowed their marriage, they might not have left us so soon," he said with a voice full of regret and sadness, making me realize how much my father was loved. "Yes, but my parents looked happy. And I'm really happy to have met you, grandfather." "Is that so? Is that so?" My grandfather nodded several times, trying to hold back tears, and firmly grasped my hand. "I made it in time this time. Thank you for being alive." His words made me aware of how much he had mourned my parents' accident, and tears fell from my eyes too. I'm grateful to my parents for giving birth to me and to you, grandfather and uncle." My words made my grandfather and my uncle, who was standing by the bed, look at me. "Thank you for finding me." Thinking I was alone in the world and rushing into marriage in search of a family, I ended up failing. But now I have found my real family. There couldn't be anything happier than this. Now I am living happily with my family.